Hi, thank you for hearing me tonight, Chairman and the rest of the committee, Judiciary Committee. Sorry, I'm tired. So are you. I will keep it short because people have made very good points. But I'm here really to tell you my story. I'm a volunteer for the coalition. I'm also a Sandy Hook Promise leader, so I stay in touch with my colleagues from Newtown. As government leaders, you have an opportunity to take a crucial step towards improving the safety of our children, and I want to really stress safety. I'm going to skip over a bunch of stuff. I'm asking you to support the House Bill 5345, which prohibits concealed carry in K-12 schools with an exception of trained peace officers. Why is this the third year that this same bill has been proposed? Now, I wrote this before I heard everything tonight. Is it because our nation has developed a propensity for false arguments of a good guy with a gun who can be a hero? The arguments may resonate with those who believe that carrying a gun makes them safer, but it fails to address the true issue of child safety in school. And I do have a clear understanding about what the solution should be. No guns should be allowed in the school with the exception of trained peace officers. And I believe we've had that definition of what that is. My thoughts come from a tragic experience. I'm a retired Newtown teacher who was teaching on December 14th, 2012. My classroom was in the middle school down the street from the Sandy Hook School. My students and I were forced into a terrifying 2.5-hour lockdown because of the fear of a second shooter moving through the woods. We experienced our own kind of terror that day. Imagine asking 24, 13-year-olds to not talk, to not eat, to not move. Sorry. The only communication from the outside world was the sound of sirens and helicopters in the air. This was only the beginning of the nightmare. And so you heard that it was over 9 minutes for the Sandy Hook teachers and all that. But for our school, you have to just imagine what your kids, I feel. I'm sorry I'm a little shaky because it doesn't get any easier after almost 5 years to talk about this. And my whole work is about prevention. So imagine that you've got these kids looking in front of you and you hear sirens and they're looking at you for, to some kind of indication about what's going on. And I knew it was going on because of the sirens and ambulances, how about this, going in one direction and then not coming back. Like, I'm a science teacher, so I'm like, the kids they're not stupid. They're like, what's going on? And so I asked them to pray, to meditate, whatever it is that they do, because obviously there's something bad going on. And there was no communication. I'm also an administrator, and at that time we weren't even allowed to put on cell phones. That all changed after Sandy Hook. So I was in the dark until I hid under my desk and pulled out my cell phone, and my sister, without the kids seeing, was telling me that there might be another shooter. My phone's lighting up. My family thought I was dead. They work at IBM, and they were told that I was dead, or that the shooting was at my school. It was terrible. So this is the beginning of the nightmare. We learned after the lockdown that 20 children and 6 educators had been murdered. Newtown is a small town, so I only knew someone who had been killed. The fog of the tragedy remained even as the media moved on. Things as simple as grocery shopping became awkward for fear of seeing the pain in your neighbor's eyes. And God forbid, it was one of the parents who lost their child, or student who lost their sibling. I stayed on for 2 years as a teacher and administrator and then moved to Rhode Island. It has been almost 5 years since the shootings, and the Newtown community, though resilient, continues a daily struggle to heal. And I encourage you all to watch the movie Newtown, or to go back and watch 60 Minutes. And Newtown, those are my friends and parents and Sandy Hook people, Sandy Hook Promise. So I want to tell you, so given this trauma we went through, and see you all talk about hypothetical situations. I actually lived this, okay? So, and you might think that as educators we would jump at the opportunity to have more protection. And yes, we were privately approached by people in organizations to train with guns and to fight for that. However, the Sandy Hook Advisory Commission, made up of educators, my peers, law enforcement that I knew very well, psychiatrists, lawmakers, legal professionals, parents, did not, they had a lot of recommendations about safety, which are all probably in your schools now, did not recommend the arming of teachers or non-enforcement civilians in schools. That was a recommendation. So you wonder why this is. Here in Rhode Island, and also, of course, in Newtown, the first, so the police officer that was first there, that got there in whatever you quoted, 9 minutes, I don't really remember the minutes, you know, you kind of, when you're in trauma like that, he was the one who ran through that door along with a pediatrician friend of mine, and by the way, just so you know, there's these guys undercover, you know, FBI agents that were showing up. If you saw the pictures, they were pulling out machine guns that work undercover all over the place. And so they were all like swooped in, which kind of scared me half to death. But so they were there pretty quick. Okay, so the police officers, I talked to the state, the chief association, a bunch of police chiefs in Rhode Island. I've also talked, of course, to the ones in Newtown. Support the legislation to end concealed carry in our schools. I mean, you heard that, they all do. Police officers are highly trained, and this includes a 3-day training each year to help them handle these life-threatening situations. Most concealed weapon carriers do not have this intensive training. And I know from, and I was really happy to hear that you train, but this is something that you decide to do. So that's a whole different situation, I get that. But even my friend who went in, he saw the shooter, who then saw him, and he watched him shoot himself. He said, you have to be so cognizant, even though the teachers were hiding kids, there were still kids running out, and when you shoot a gun, you don't know, even these are highly trained guys, it's going to ricochet, things like that, people die. So it's you know, someone said, oh, I really need some water, and I have none. Could I have some water, please? I can't talk anymore, but you probably would love that. But anyways, and by the way, just so you know, I'm not against guns. I was actually, my grandpa was a pretty good shot with a .22 growing up. I'm not against them. My brothers and brother-in-law, they belong to the NRA. They believe in these. They believe in this. You know, we have lots of conversations about this stuff. And when I talk to them about my fears. So anyways, you've already heard about the Utah teacher shot herself going to the bathroom and all this stuff. And you've heard about over and over again, and I'm not going to tell you the stats. I mean, I know all these stats about the kids. I mean, you hear about these little kids picking up their mom's gun or the father's gun themselves. I mean, so for us as educators, and so I don't know, so there's an educator there, and I teach middle school. I mean, you've all been in school, and you maybe have middle school. I mean, it is a very trying situation just to try to teach, okay, just to focus on, I mean, my kids, I'm a science teacher. They have scalpels. I mean, that's a dangerous weapon. No, I'm not kidding you. And I don't mean to be, I mean, I did have a kid who kind of lost it and went after my student, well, the teacher in the next room with this scalpel, so we had to go into lockdown. So these things happen. The kids can be volatile. But knowing that, I really personally, I don't have time to train. And I mean, I'm an alert for, you know, we have a heterogeneous group. We love them all. We take them all. We don't separate the kids out into special places anymore. And even just hormones flaring, you never know what's going to happen. So for me to try to teach and to be a good teacher, create relationships, I personally, and I'm speaking for Newtown teachers because none of us wanted guns in schools. We didn't. And Sandy Hook Promise doesn't advocate for it. No, you're not. There's tons of teachers that are in moms. Abby Clemens, who is at Sandy Hook, who's a brave teacher. She still teaches, and she goes out and fights for these things to protect children. So, in ending, school should be a safe place for teachers to teach and students to learn. Teaching takes all of your attention. So allowing staff in schools under the present law to carry concealed weapons just doesn't, this common sense thing, and I don't even like that term, but for me it just doesn't seem like the right thing. But please ask me questions, because I hear people describing Sandy Hook. I was there. I know it like the back of my hand. So if you have questions about afterwards, we had to ask the, so maybe you don't know this, but Yale has a team that flies in. They go all over the world when there's a crisis for children. And so they brought in all of these really nice psychiatrists, but they had uniforms on. And the kids were already terrorized. So we had to get them to put in regular clothing, because, the best thing for the kids was comfort dogs. But what I lived through for the next 2 years was just trying to recreate community. And, we were all traumatized. It's not something we're going to get over with. And, I don't want you to wait till this happens. And I don't want to believe it's only a matter of time. So for me, it's prevention. I do work and we sort of practice. We sort of justice, mindfulness. I do all those things in your schools. And I do notice, since I've been going to charter schools and doing my work, that there's really good security as far as to get in. You have to get a name tag now. You have to sign up. We didn't have all that junk going on in Newtown. We have, the new Sandy Hook School, if you saw that. They have special locks and windows. And so those kinds of things that can do, because do we want kids to live in a place where there's armed guards? Is that how we grew up? So we fear, the accidental things with guns. And, if you could tell me that these concealed people are all trained like you are, that is something, that's a very different conversation that I would have, But I just don't think, as educators, I want to be home creating, fantastic lessons, not going out and shooting. I want to run my dogs on the beach, and I want to go to practice. Some teachers might want to. That's not me. So, any questions at all?
Thank you, Wendy, for your very powerful testimony. I did read what you had submitted before we came in today, too. Vice Chair McEntee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wendy, great job. And I had a question. Now, prior to the terrible incident at Sandy Hook, was it a gun-free zone? Was the school a gun-free zone at that point? That's what they keep saying here.
I'm pretty sure, because I'm pretty sure that it was. I can check that out for you guys. I'm pretty sure.
But there was no sign on the school.
No, just like everybody thinks that, the school, I'm not kidding you, they think that this is a gun-free zone, like every school. I don't think people broadcast that.
Yeah.
If you talk to most people, and probably every state, wouldn't we all assume that people can't bring a gun to school?
Well, it's interesting that you raised that point, Wendy, because when the anti-gun groups came to me 3 years ago and said, we're going to introduce this bill, I said, there's no one in Rhode Island that thinks you can bring a gun to school right now. Don't introduce the bill.
Right. Right.
Well, I'm not going to name any other.
I think.
But other representatives felt the same way.
I'm not going to disagree with you. So now they know you can't. You can look at
now it's been publicized.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I hear that part. But since because teachers were approached about actually that is something that people believe in, of arming teachers. It does sound. I have friends. I have a principal degree, and I was a sub principal because my vice principal had post-traumatic stress, so I had to sub in, and so I had a lot of conversation. And there are some principals in Rhode Island that think it's a good idea, but if you talk to the principals that were left and then went to other school districts, they didn't think it was a good idea, having lived through all of it. But making your school safer by putting in these and there's studies, the government, I had to take, because I was a sub-principal, I had to be prepared for a lockdown, which thank God there was never one while I was still there in the last 2 years. So a huge responsibility, and that's why these guys, just gigantic.
Wendy, I had another question. Prior to the incident in Sandy Hook, did you have the locked doors? Like now when you go into a school, you got to buzz in, you got to report to the office. Every school I go into, it seems like that has come about since the incident in Sandy Hook.
And the thing with so we got all these donations, and you saw the news, right? All the bears and all this stuff, dogs and.
But did you have that in your school prior to the incident?
We got donated locks. I'm sorry for going on a tangent. We got donated special locks. In a science classroom, we have to have 2 exits, and I had a chemical lab. So for me, what I have to do, and it's a long, old building, is I had to step out and lock my door, this door, and then walk probably over to that window and lock another door, and also check the bathroom, and if there's any kids in there, whip them out. But they were very concerned about that amount of time when you're in the hall if someone's coming down with a gun,
But I mean the front door. Were they?
Yeah, the front door too, but the
But I mean the front, right now, excuse me for a minute, when I go to the local schools in South Kingstown, I got to press the buzzer, then they unlock the door, then you have to go to the second, you've got to go into the principal's office, not the principal's office, the main office there, and then they let you in.
Right.
Now, was that the case in...
Have that until after. Sandy Hook did.
Well, I think that's what came about after this, I think, in a lot of schools, which I don't think a lot of people recognize. Unless you go to the schools, you don't realize it's that hard to get in anymore. So there is that,
and that makes
that sense of security there.
Who's in there? They've got the tag and
everybody has a tag, and you have to sign in.
That's a bit. I think it's a deterrent, personally.
So, I don't see that. So the argument saying that you need a gun in school, or you need all these people with guns to protect you, I think some of that's already been addressed, that, we're locking the front door. Right. You have to report to the office. You have to sign in. You've got to get a pass to keep going. They don't just let somebody fly through the front door.
Having the drills so the kids know what to do. The whole thing of hiding them is so, because the shooter will go where they hear noise. And so, all those things. Kids, it's unfortunate. It's sad. First graders have to hide.
I know, it's awful.
But anyway.
Thank you.
I'm sorry that I had the dry mouth. Oh, go ahead.
Representative Bella Wilkinson.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wendy, first of all, thank you for sharing. I know I could see that it wasn't easy for you, and I'm sure that even as you're saying it, you're reliving it. So the fact that you're willing to come here, tell us what you went through, is something that I don't take lightly. Thank you very much for being here. I want to mention, just for the record, for you and for the people that are here in the listening audience at home, that all of us are after the same thing. I don't, as someone who owns guns, who's been raised in a household with guns, prior military, I'm also against gun violence. I don't think you'll find anyone who's pro-Second Amendment that would say they're also for pro-gun violence. And the issue is, how do we, as a community, those who go from one extreme to saying they don't want any gun control, to those at the other extreme who say they don't want any guns, how do we find the middle ground as a society, as a community in the state of Rhode Island to address gun violence? Some of the issues have been brought up by this panel. What is the actual issue? Is the issue the criminal element? Does it deal with the mental illness, or how do we get to the root of the problem? So I'm going to just ask you just a few questions based on your testimony. I understand that the gun-free zones for the schools doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have a great big sign with lights that declares it's a gun-free zone. We have smoke-free zones at the schools. We know the kids still smoke. We have drug-free zones at the schools. We know the kids are still doing drugs. They're either using it, they're selling it, they're moving it, and that's happening all the time anyway. I'm not advocating that the teachers be armed. If, however, a teacher was trained in their CC and had their concealed carry weapons permit, that's a totally different situation as far as I'm concerned. I'm concerned because some of the testimony indicated that one of the options is that we require teachers to be armed, and that changes the conditions of employment, and not everyone's going to be comfortable. And just because...
Well, I'm saying that was suggested. That's not...
I would never suggest that.
Our school. I'm saying it was from an outside groups of people that came in, that had private meetings with teachers and saying, push this through.
So it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, please, that your belief is that no teacher who is basically in the classroom should have the ability to have their concealed carry weapons permit while they're on school grounds, because it doesn't offer any added protections. Is that correct?
I think it's more of a, it's dangerous, I feel. Teaching is it's hard to explain. Everybody has gone to school, but to be a teacher, we have to make a million decisions. Mm-hmm. And, especially, even with little guys. I'm not a first grade teacher. I'm always in amazement how they do that. But, middle school and high school I am familiar with, and you have to just, I don't want to say be on alert, but things can get, they can be kooky. They act without thinking sometimes, and it's just to try to manage or like I said, teaching a science lab with 25 kids, doing, different things with chemicals. My intention should be on teaching, making sure I'm doing a good job, reinforcing them, establishing a relationship, and that's where my focus is.
Sure.
Which is why I love to teach, because I don't think about all the other muck and that's going on.
What about other adults, parents that are coming in, whether it's for athletic events or for teacher conferences, individuals who have gone through the process in Rhode Island? Again, that's live fire requirements for qualifications. I don't know what the CCW requirements are in Connecticut, but what is your view with regards to other adults, non-faculty, who come in and out of the school, having the ability to carry concealed as opposed to having their weapon locked in the vehicle?
I know that I've heard, the good guy with a gun that I stated, which probably get people irritated here, but, are you going to be in school when these things happen, right? It's our own private, it's our little family, our community. So, especially middle school and high school, you don't have parents coming around as much as you do, hardly at all. The kids don't want their parents there, quite frankly. Elementary school, you might have someone come in to read, or grandma comes in to read, or grandpa comes in to read. Okay, so that I could understand, but there's really no need to carry a gun into a school, because they're not going to be there when these things happen. It would be a very small % chance, I think, right, that it would happen, that somebody would, that incident would. So when Adam came in to Sandy Hook, parents were about to come into the school, but he did it right when school was right at the very beginning. So are you under the impression that none of the parents of the children were carrying concealed when they came to the school? Would you have known if any of the parents?
They couldn't carry, I don't think, at that time. I'm not sure. I have to check on that. That's a very good question.
Okay. Right.
But it's funny, even the parents whose kids survived, they didn't want guns in schools, except for, and I will be honest, we did have, and you must understand, we always had a middle school resource officer whose his whole purpose there was, he was kind of a buddy with the kids, that whole dare kind of thing, but he was armed. We had security guard, and then the high school. But that's also an age where, kids, they really want to have that relationship with the kids. But not, and then after this thing happened, then the 5-6 elementaries did have all volunteer police officers, and the parking lot from the other towns volunteered, and then that went away, and there was just one police officer.
And did I understand you to say that you were also raised in a household where there was weapons? Have you ever shot a handgun?
Not a handgun, a .22.
Okay, .22 rifle.
So my grandpa had. My parents didn't. My mother was raised. My parents didn't. But my brother, he taught my, I'm around my brothers, brother-in-laws all hunt.
Okay.
And some do have for protection. Some of them do.
Thank you for your testimony tonight.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Any
for
further
the water,
questions?
I owe you.
Thank you.